Hello, beautiful people. This is Raymond Habel. Hello, beautiful people. This is the Mendo Money Mindset Show. I'm your humble host, Raymond Habel, lifetime resident of Mendocino County. Lifetime resident of Mendocino County. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, boy. And welcome to the Money Mindset. And welcome to the Mendo Money Mindset Show. My name is Raymond Habel, your humble host, lifetime resident of Mendocino County, as well as licensed realtor and real estate investor for the past 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years now. Okay. And welcome to the Mendo Money Mindset Show. My name is Raymond Habel, your humble host, lifetime resident of Mendocino County, and real estate and licensed realtor for the past 6 years. Hope you're doing amazing and well today. As of this recording, it is warm, sunny. Sun is shining, 70 degrees. It feels mighty nice. As you know, or as you might hear, this show comes in 3 parts. This comes in the market part. I need a lozenger. I need a lozenger. No one wants to hear me eating candy. So, makes you salivate. Okay. Hello, wonderful people. This is the Mendo Money Mindset Show. My name is Raymond Habel, your humble host, lifetime resident of Mendocino County, and realtor for the last 6 years now. Time flies when you're having fun. Hope you're all doing amazing and well. As of the recording of this show, it's warm, it's sunny, it's almost 80 degrees. It's pretty amazing. All right, let's do this thing. And welcome to the Mendo Money Mindset Show. My name is Raymond Habel, your humble host, lifetime resident, and realtor for the past 6 years. I hope you're all doing amazing and well. We have a pretty exciting show today. Fairly excited to discuss with you March Market Update 2025. Can't believe we're already well in spring. Also, we have a couple of other fun things lined up. If you've heard this show at all, then you will know that this show comes in 3 parts. We talk about the market, real estate, as that's my experience. I try to help my clients answer the question, how is the market? And in doing so, we've created our Mendocino County Market Report, which I'll go over with you in a little bit. But we also tend to go through a couple of other things I personally find interesting, which is 1, the finance bit. We talk about things of finance, things that could aid us to increase our net worth, maybe reduce our debt, maybe have a lifestyle that we would prefer to have. And then finally, we go into the motivation, into the mindset, into the mental frames which help coat all of this thing called life and make it a little bit easier. If you think the way I think and if you feel the way I feel, then you will understand that no amount of money on this wonderful, green, beautiful world we have will ever make you happy. As we go into this, we'll start with the market report and then go right on from there. However, I have a wonderful little quote today, a little story, if I can share with you. So I was at the doctor's the other day, getting my blood drawn for just a routine test, just to make sure everything's going well. And I'm lucky enough, knock on wood, that so far everything checks out. But when I was there, I sat there in this little, kind of reminds me of a high chair where the nurses can get that sample from you and go and get your blood tested. And as they were going about this, there was this beautiful canvassed photo above the wall, and it had a quote on there, which I smiled at a little bit, and I've been thinking about ever since. And the quote for this show, and the quote that I saw on that wall, is this: "No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted." No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. What a wonderful quote. This is by Aesop, if I'm pronouncing that right. Let me know if I'm not. A public figure that I can greatly sympathize with over this statement. And this, funny enough, actually comes back almost a decade ago, when I was first understanding this little bit thing called self-development. I wrote on my mirror a little piece of paper which I've taped, and that has been on my mirror for almost a decade. This one statement is how I've chosen to live my life in certain areas in my way of approaching the world. And this quote reminded me of that quote which I wrote on my mirror almost a decade ago. And that quote goes like this: "I shall pass this way but once. Therefore, any good I can do or any kindness that I can show to another human being, don't let me defer nor neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." I shall pass this way, but only once. I might as well do all the good I can while I'm here. What a great quote. So that brings us to the quote of the day, and understanding that no matter how small, an act of kindness is never wasted. I hope that resonates with you. Especially as we hit the springtime and as we're seeing growth happen, as we're seeing the beautiful grass in the landscapes, I hope that there is an opportunity for you in the next week in which you can demonstrate an act of kindness. What do you think about that? All right, enough of that. Let's go into the market update. So as you may know from previous market updates, this is what we pull from our 6-page PDF that our team creates every single month. If you want to see the pretty pictures, the graphics, let me know, reach out to me, and I can send this to you absolutely for free as a resource. I'll be reading to you the most important points that I have found as we're looking at this spring market. We're going to go over the month of March. We're recording April, but we go with the data that we have. This data just came out. We just made this report T-minus less than 24 hours ago, and I wanted to share it with you. Going right into this, as you might know from reading, from listening to other Mendo Money Mindset shows, we always start with the active for sale inventory in Mendocino County. How much is for sale right now, and why does that matter? Currently, our homes right now are up 19.8% year over year. For sale active inventory. And this is comparing apples to apples, which means we are comparing March 2025 to March 2024. So comparing this spring to spring from 2024 to 2025, both post high interest rates hikes, we're seeing an almost 20% increase in active inventory. Now that's interesting, but pair it with this. Our sold homes from March 2024 to March 2025 have dropped 18% year over year. This may indicate, and we'll talk about a little bit later, there's some uncertainty happening right now in today's market. Now, we do like to pair this with pending homes. Now, if you don't know what pending homes is as a metric, it simply means how many escrows are we currently having? As you might know, if you've ever transacted on a home, you will typically shake hands between buyer and seller and then enter into a 30 to 60 day agreement to then begin the process of closing that home. That is what we call pending. It's pending, it's off the market, no one else is going to buy it, but we're still waiting for that final close date. Pending is a wonderful indicator for people like me in the real estate business because it's what we call a leading indicator. This is a leading indicator for next month's closed. So this is actually interesting because we're up 62% month over month from February to March. A very sharp increase. However, we're seeing a 22% increase year over year, which may, and this is why we need to look at these reports, which may have a result for next month and sort of equal out what we're seeing as a decrease for March solds. I hope that makes sense. What we're seeing is pending homes are on the rise, solds are down, however our inventory is up all year over year. Next thing is, and this is as close as I can get over the radio with you on answering the question, how much is your home worth? This is what I can give you as an answer. Not knowing your situation, not knowing your home. What I do know is the sold price per square foot on average for Mendocino County. This came in at March at $345 per square foot, which is a marginal increase of 3.3% year over year. We then go to days on market, which is what happens the day I put that for sale sign in my front yard all the way until closing. How long does that typically take? This has reached a 131 days on market, which is 31% increase higher, a longer days on market year over year. We're now above the 4-month mark on average for homes for sale in Mendocino County. This will come back a little bit later with a different metric we're going to look at, and this is why it's important. So average active price, we're down 22.9% year over year. This means our active prices, we can see this one of two ways. We can see the market is correcting, or we can see that sellers are pricing closer to what a market price might be, a transactable price. We're seeing that this is coming down year over year, but our average sold prices are on the increase, are going up 14.6% year over year. Now this goes into what I like, one of my favorite metrics, months of inventory. If you've never heard this metric before, it is the best way I can describe it is if we had 100 homes on the market and we could not put another home on the market, that was it. It was in its little bubble and we couldn't do anything about it. How many months would it take for us to sell all 100 homes? That is months of inventory. And this uses two different metrics that we've already discussed. It talks about days on market and active inventory. If there's a lot of active inventory, however, days on market are super low as we're just going through these deals, then that might mean it's a lower months of inventory. If we have very little active inventory, but we have huge days on market as these properties are just taking forever to sell, that could also give us a bigger days on market, or months of inventory. So what we are seeing now, what the data shows us, is year over year we are up 47.5%, almost 50% compared to 2024. And this is because of the two things that we've just talked about. We're past the 4-month mark for average days on market, and we also have an almost 20% increase in active inventory. Now, what does this mean? Okay, Raymond, thank you. I appreciate all the data. I can hear that you're a numbers guy. But what does this mean for me? What does this mean in my situation? What does this mean for my home, for my buying technique? What's going on? Here's what's going on. For sellers, spring is typically the highest amount of transacted volume all year. Everyone is post-holidays, the weather is nice, the lawns are green, people want to do transactions in the spring. So what we're going to see is a lot of volume. Now, this is a double-edged sword. For the seller, it's a great opportunity because we're going to have a lot of buyers looking. However, you're also going to have a lot of competition. It is more important than ever to sit down with a competent realtor or a competent team that you are working with to make a pricing strategy, a marketing strategy, an approach that works for you. Ideally, you want to get it below that 4-month watermark, days on market on average. Now, if you're selling a rural piece of acreage, just land, no home, it's going to be a different situation. If you're selling a commercial property, we have a large commercial property right now we're negotiating with. It's going to be a different story. But for single family homes, on average, you need to be talking pricing strategy. Did you know there's actually 3 different pricing strategies? Let me know if that interests you. I can go into that in a future episode. For buyers, this is an amazing time to buy. You've heard me talk about it in the past, but especially in this market, we're seeing a rise of inventory, which gives the buyer more options. And then we're also seeing longer days on market. I encourage any buyer that has looked at a home maybe several times. Maybe you're scrolling on realtor.com and you keep seeing the same home over and over again. If it meets your criteria, if it meets all of the other things that you were looking for in a home, aside from price, I would encourage you, go back to the seller, give an offer that makes sense for you, and see what happens. Sellers, when they have a home on the market, they will still be paying expenses. They'll still be paying insurance, still be paying utilities, they'll still be paying taxes. These are all holding costs which are coming out of their pocket month over month. The longer the home is on the market, the more that eats away at their strategy, the more they might be willing to negotiate with you on these terms. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think now is a good time to buy? If so, what's going to be your approach? Do you think now is a good time to sell? Especially given your personal circumstance. I don't think I've met a single client over the past 6 years that has simply sold and had no regard for their personal situation when it comes to timing. Most sellers that I know always have a personal factor or a personal timeline associated with the sell. Sometimes we as sellers, we have to sell. We got a job transfer, we got a new baby, or we got to do something. In-laws are coming. What is your situation? Can your situation dictate that we maybe sell sooner, try to take opportunity of this spring market? Maybe you have a niche property that kind of is a cornerstone amongst all this competition. Or do you need to delay? Do you need to wait until the fall because there's certain timelines that you have? These are all questions to ask yourself. But I hope that makes sense. I hope if nothing else, this adds value. And as I tell my clients, I'm just helping you make an informed decision. Whether you buy or don't buy, whether you sell or don't sell, whether you invest or don't invest, whether you rent or don't rent. I simply want to give you the most information possible so you can make the best decision for you. So going into our next little phase, this is going to be our finance section. We are going to be talking about tariffs. Now, what I will say is for everything, I don't know many things. I would say this is for entertainment purposes only. Talk to someone much smarter than me. I do know a couple of things. Mindset, real estate. When it comes to the tariff conversation, I am very uninformed about the entire process. There is hour-long podcasts, documentaries, books dedicated all to this subject. If this is something of interest, I suggest diving deep and finding good resources from credible, smart people. What I have done is I have pulled up a couple of articles that I found were informational for me. These were things that, as you know on this show, we like to do personal finance. So what we'll be talking about is marrying the idea of tariffs and the consequences we are beginning to see and how we can protect our personal finances. What do we need to do differently? What do we need to do more of? As my coach always asks me, what do I need to stop doing? These are all questions that I hope to answer with this conversation around personal finances and tariffs. So first, there's this wonderful article written by these wonderful guys. These are the CWG advisors. And it says, what to do with tariffs in your financial plan. So first, what is a tariff? This says on this article, tariffs are taxes or duties levied on imported goods by governments. Historically, they've been used to protect domestic industries, punish foreign competitors, or pressure trading partners into economic agreements. We can see a lot of that happening now. Now, we can talk about how tariffs affect the economy and how globally it can happen, or if you have a business in imports, how it can affect your business. What I really want to zoom in on is how can we, the average Joe that maybe not see tariffs or deal with them on a daily basis, how can we protect our personal wealth when it comes to what we can do? How can we be proactive in this situation and not reactive? So first, it says here the number one thing to look out for. How does this affect your financial goals? It says the effects on tariffs and your financial portfolio, your investment portfolio. This is things, and it'll talk about retirement accounts, but this is things like brokerage accounts. I don't watch the stock market too much, but I'm talking with a lot of good friends that are having their own philosophical conversations on what to do with their stocks currently. This does have an impact, as we have begun to see. And so this is something to be aware of. This might be a good opportunity, especially as we've just ended Q1, ending into Q2, to go ahead and look at our stock portfolios. What does your brokerage accounts look like? What does your year over year look like? How does the quarter performed? Now, I do want to say this with a caveat. Don't start making judgment calls yet. If you're seeing things and you're starting to feel emotions because, these numbers really look red, they're not in the black like they used to 18 months ago, I would still encourage we're making informed decisions. Our emotions are valid. Our behaviors are not. Our emotions to feel scared, to feel anxious, to feel worried are all valid. The behaviors we do by panic selling and trying to run away from the issue is not. That doesn't help. Number 2, it says inflation's impact on your purchasing power. Yes, inflation is here to stay. From the smart people, and again, there's much smarter people than I on this very subject, they are saying that inflation is here to stay. Along with tariffs, which means imported goods have now gone up, which also means that we're now having these discussions, or wars, if you'd like to call them, from other countries which are raising their prices, which then, again, also impact our purchasing power. So what I would encourage, as we've seen over the past couple of years, look at your grocery bill. How has inflation gone up recently? Yes, it might be a scary thing to pull that receipt out and take a look at how much eggs are nowadays. But I think this is a very important exercise because this will show us on a very granular day-to-day basis what is the impact of inflation having on me. What does it have on me, my livelihood, my food, my family? This is a great way to know this. Now, knowing is wonderful, but acting is even better. How do we act on this? Well, once we understand, hey, there's a 10% inflation on my usual grocery bill, and I didn't buy anything different, we can then start tweaking our budget. Then we can start looking at the numbers. We can start saying, okay, where do I need to take from to still meet my goals? That's the action. Number 3, long-term effects on retirement accounts. I spoke with a gentleman the other day about his retirement account. He said, Raymond, the profits I've made over the past 10 years have been wiped out in 6 months. And I don't know his situation. Again, this is for entertainment purposes, but boy, do I understand and sympathize with that. And there is a real consequence to seeing this go down, these stocks. What I would say is look at it, make an informed decision, and go from there. Talk to your CPA, talk to your retirement person, talk to your accountants, talk to anybody maybe at your company with HR about these retirement accounts. But go ahead and look and see what's going on. There is going to be probably some long-term corrections before we start seeing the same prices we did on the last high. Number 4 does talk about business owners and supply chains. If you are a business owner, you've probably already had this conversation, but if you haven't, look at your supply chain. What are you usually buying? What goods from other countries or other areas are you usually buying? And maybe pull up your P&L. Maybe pull up your accounts payable and say, okay, where do we sit? This is a great exercise for ending of a quarter and beginning of another to see what your baseline expenses are for your business. Now, we're going to stay informed about the trade policies. That's something you can choose to do. Again, talk to people a lot smarter than me. We can diversify assets across sectors and regions. Yes, is there some sort of investments you'd like to do in different little pockets to help you diversify, to help put your eggs in more different baskets? Yes, those eggs are expensive. Let's go ahead and put those in different baskets. Adjust your budget for inflation. As we've talked about, look at your grocery bill. Look at your main bills. I know PG&E just went up again. Take a look at that. Where do we need to adjust? Now again, this is not all just cutting down on the fun account. Oh, we can't go out anymore. This might be a conversation of, okay, how can we generate more income? Can I get a raise at work? Can we do a side hustle? Can the other spouse get a job? How else can we compensate for this inflation? And then yes, of course, cutting expenses as well. Invest in inflation-resistant assets. Again, this is not me. This is the article. This says tips, Treasury inflation-protected securities. I'm not smart enough to tell you all about that, but thank goodness for Google. We're one keyword search away from knowing everything you want to know about that. And then lastly, seek professional guidance. Talk to someone that knows a lot more than we do when it comes to this area and simply ask the question. I love asking open-ended questions, especially to give me the most strategic tactic sort of tools when it comes to, hey, what should I do in this scenario? Hey, Mr. or Mrs. CPA, what are some of the things you're seeing with other homeowners, with other businesses, with other families that they're doing right in this high inflation tariff environment? What are some tips, tactics, strategies, tools would you recommend? What did you think about that? I hope you enjoyed that. You can hear, and hopefully some of the takeaways are, revisit where you are at. Where's your baseline? What's your budget look like? What's your income look like? This might sound a lot like the basics, but it's the basics. Again, this quote I repeat to myself often because I fall prey to this. It's not often we need to learn, but more often we need to remember. Sometimes we need to remember, especially at the end of a quarter, what's our plan? What did we set out to do this year? What was the goal? Why did we even want to put away a portion of our income? So I hope this encourages that. I hope this encourages that conversation. Next, we'll be going to the last part of our show. And this was a very fun, so this was sort of spur of the moment. I actually had a completely different section set out for our mindset section. But yesterday, I had everything ready to go on this very topic. However, I had an amazing discussion with one of my arguably favorite people on this wonderful earth, and it provoked an idea. And again, it's not often I need to learn, it's often I need to remember. And so I was driving, and I was talking with one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, my beautiful baby boy. He's just turned 4. And as a 4-year-old, he's testing ideas. He's learning the frame on which we operate as a world, as a society, as a culture, as a family. And he's trying to get all this down. And he's just done daycare. And so he's now doing daycare. I think this is the first month he's done daycare. And he loves it. You know, he holds a little teacher's hand. He used to cry, but now he loves it. He's like, all right, Dad, goodbye, go. So it's super cute. But in the morning, we were prepping him for school, and he was laying there in bed, all fully dressed, and he was staring out into space. And I said, handsome boy, what are you doing? And he said, Daddy, I'm thinking. And I said, really? What are you thinking about? He says, I'm thinking of crabs. And I thought, and I said, okay. So, well, what are you thinking about crabs? He said, well, Daddy, it's like, I want to be a crab. And I said, oh, okay. I said, you're using your imagination then. He says, imagination? Looks up at me, one eyebrow's arched, his head's tilted like a dog. He's like, what's that? And I was like, well, I don't know how you describe imagination. I said, well, what I think it is when you play pictures in your head and you can make pictures in movies and you can create things. And I said, you can think of little movies. And I closed my eyes and I said, imagine you're a crab. And I did my little hands in that crab claw motion. And I said, I can imagine I'm a big crab and I'm going in the water. I come out and I'm eating little algae. And he's closing his eyes with me and he's doing this. Open my eyes again. And he says, okay, Daddy. You know, he's used to weird dad. So we go runs and we get ready to go into the car. And I see him closing his eyes, and I've forgotten all about this. And I see him closing his eyes, and it's the cutest thing. He's holding his little hands like you would in an Om meditation. If you can visualize that, the gentleman sitting cross-legged, is kind of holding his index fingers to his thumb, and he's doing this. Now, I don't know where my son picked that up. He's never seen one of those movies. I don't know where. I don't know if this is just an instinctual human thing. But he's doing this little thing with his hands, with his eyes closed, and I'm trying not to laugh because he's so serious about this. And I said, handsome, what are you doing? And he says, Daddy, I'm using my what's the word again? And I said, it's imagination. He's like, yeah, imagination. And he was sitting there and he was visualizing these things in his head. He says, I'm thinking of being a crab. A little claw action came out. And I was just thinking, I was like, so after we dropped him off, and I thought about this, and I said, how wonderful, first of all, is it to see life through the eyes of a child, because everything's new and different, and it's refreshing. It's a beautiful perspective. But also, how useful is imagination? In one morning, my son understood the idea of visualization and creating tapes in his head of what alternate reality could look like. So, on this wonderful section, we're going to talk a little bit about imagination, the power of imagination, some tactics we can use, and some of the things we might want to think about when it comes to improving our lives. How can we use imagination for this? Now, first, I want to talk about a quote, which I don't have readily available, so we'll talk about it next time. But if I paraphrase, it's an Albert Einstein quote, and it said something to the effect that if it were a matter of imagination or knowledge, I would take imagination every single time. Because we can form new answers to different problems using imagination that we can't do with current knowledge. What do you think about that? So when it comes to imagination, I want to talk about a couple of things. We're going to first look at this wonderful Forbes article, and it says how to effectively capture the power of imagination. Now, I want to go through this a little bit with you first, and then I want to give you some more tactics, strategies on, first, why this is important, but two, how we can adopt this in a day-to-day life. Oh, here's the quote right here. Albert Einstein, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas an imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress and giving birth to evolution. Can't get better than that. So, imagination. Why is it important? This, from the Forbes, says one of the most critical aspects to existence is imagination. We cut ourselves off from this phenomenon, attributing to its challenges in life and just everyday happenstance and what we do. Every idea we have and every chance we have started as a thought in our head, we have the power to recognize and reframe it to make it work in our favor. This is why imagination is important. Imagination is the way we think out of the box. It's a gateway to experiencing magic, beautiful moments. It keeps us passionate about things in life. It opens the door for, it says a color-free future, but it opens the door for curiosity, which I think is closely paired with imagination. It enhances our tenacity to make better plans. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. So, how can we enhance our imagination? First, let's take time to reflect. The death of boredom has been a growing concern for a lot of smart people out there, as we have these wonderful devices in our hands that can kill boredom in an instant at any moment in our free time. However, what we don't realize, what I don't realize, what I'm often the victim of, because I do this, is boredom is beautiful because it gives us space to then take a deep breath, reflect, and oh, by the way, use our imagination. Number one, it says take time to reflect. We need to get sync and rhythm. We need to be present. That helps. So take a couple of deep breaths. Listen to some music. Minimize your screen time. I would say go on a walk or make your meal time. Man, this is somewhat what I like to do while cooking. Just zone out while cooking. Cooking is a great time for the idle hands to do something and your mind to wander. Number two, it says ask open and active questions. Sometimes it's challenging to get immediate answers. However, taking a step back, employing good questions can help. Good questions should be asked in a fashion that inspires the exploration of ideas, topics, strategies, concepts. Number three, it says hunt down the unexpected. Imagination is sparked by unexpected inputs. Have you ever been in a rut before? Have you ever done the same thing in and out over and over again? Is that feeling, as soon as I mention that feeling you're currently experiencing, do you think having an unexpected input, some stimulus, would help get out of that? Be curious to know. Number four, it says stay hopeful. Did you know that we're actually statistically smarter when we're happy? Chris Voss says in his book, Never Split the Difference. Yeah, we are smarter. Statistics show. They did a study. When we're happy, when we're in good rapport with someone, we're smarter. We make better decisions. Stay hopeful. A good use of imagination positively is staying hopeful while doing it. Encourage experimentation. Go, do things, experiment. Experiment goes back to what we're talking about in getting to a rut and giving us unexpected inputs. Hey, the nature of an experiment is doing something you don't know the answer to. Do something. Get a response, get a consequence, which can be both good and bad, and then say, whoa, how has this changed my world? How has this changed the way I look? That's all an imaginative process. How can you plan effectively through imagination? Well, first you're going to talk about a couple of things. Now, what I do want to pivot on, and something I think is very important, is what is the difference between good visualization, things that will help you, and rumination? You know what I'm talking about? The downward spirals that we always think about. Oh my gosh, what if Tiffany says this? Ooh, that client at work, what if this happens? Oh my gosh, if the boy does this, what's going to happen then? All of this is negative visualization. Now, this can help you, and I want to talk about that for a quick second. So, in the space of awareness, and I look at this kind of as the martial arts perspective, they have something called mental reps. They say, hey, do the exercises, physically do it so your body can map out how to do the things that you need to do. Put your arm here, go up here. All of that stuff is good. But what people can also do is mental reps. Now, what is a mental rep? Mental rep is simply playing in your head, using your imagination on what will happen. Now, you can do this both for the positive outcome and for the negative outcome. Imagine this. You are afraid of talking with your boss about a pay raise. And it's almost like the vagueness of just saying, ugh, I'm scared, is overwhelming. It's looking into a big abyss and not knowing how deep it is. However, try this out. What if you did a mental rep? Okay, what is the most probable negative thing that will happen? Well, maybe my boss won't see what I see. Maybe they'll say, actually, there's some areas I can improve on, put me on a PIP. But mostly, I'm going to walk out of that office healthy. I'm going to be alive. Maybe my pride's not intact, but everything else is going to be good in my life. Oh, okay, it's actually not that bad. Putting a negative visualization or a mental rep can be very helpful for us understanding, okay, what's really going to happen worst case situation? What's the real probable downside? Oh, okay, it's that, well, I can handle that. That's not too bad. And that allows us to take the next step. Now, that's one tactic tool. That's a tool I can give you to use imagination. What can we also do? Well, let's reverse that. We can then do the positive visualization. Now, yes, you've heard all the terms. Maybe you've seen the books. There's a huge movement towards the visualization, right? Think of it, and then it'll happen. Think of the cookie, and it'll appear in your hand. That's all great. I'm talking about actual tactics that I know work because I've done them. A positive visualization that I can recommend is simply looking at the best case situation. What's the best thing that can happen right now? I'm going to step into an appointment with a client. What is the best thing that can happen right now? Why do I want to do that visualization? Because I can then act as if. I can act as if the thing is going to happen. My body posture is different. My tone, my pitch is different. My conviction is different. Everything comes across almost subconsciously. If I have a frame that says, I know this is going to happen. I know this good thing can happen. Another tactic, a tool, a reason for this positive imagination is to start building an identity you want to live into. Well, that's all fancy, Raymond. What does that mean? That means that I simply need to think of the person I want to become. How does that person act? How does that person behave with people, their family? How does that person engage in their work, in their play, in their business? How does that person feel? What does that person eat? How often does that person exercise? What does that person say? Can you picture that? When's the last time you've ever thought about your best self? What does your best self do? When does your best self wake up? What does your best self do with your spouse or your kids or your work? What does your best self do when it comes to conflict? When it comes to stress? How does your best self handle that? Imagine that. 30 seconds of this exercise will be much more beneficial than any self-help article. Imagine what your best self does on a day-to-day basis. Now, you have a blueprint. Now you have a blueprint of where you want to go, of the kind of thing, the kind of person you want to be. And guess what? It's pretty easy to reverse engineer that. Now you can figure out the first step. One of my areas, I read a beautiful book that changed my life. And one of these days I'll talk about it. It changed my life years ago. And it's because it talked about a person going through his life and he met a mentor. And that mentor was all of the things he wanted to be. He was kind. He was engaging. He was full of laughter and love. He was also successful in both his family, personal, and career. He was intentional. He had engineered a life that he wanted to wake up to every single morning. And I thought to myself, wow, I would love to do that. One of those areas was public speaking. I started talking more. I'm talking to you on the radio because I visually looked at what I wanted my life to be. And then I said, okay, well, what's the next step? I want to be really good at public speaking. Okay, what's the next step? Getting articulate in front of people. Okay, what else can help? Doing radio shows and talking to people and showing them different ideas that might help their lives. That's all because I positively visualized. I hope that helps. I hope that these 3 areas, the Mendocino County market update for March, the numbers, the data, reading between the lines, I hope that helps. We then talked about finances. How do we navigate in a tariff environment, high inflation? What do we need to relook at? What questions do we need to ask ourselves? What areas do we need to adjust? And finally, imagination. All thanks to the conversation of a beautiful 4-year-old baby boy talking about being a crab. How does imagination impact your life? When's the last time you took a moment or two to daydream about what you want your life to look like? When's the last time you did a mental rep to understand that the downside may be not that bad? My name is Raymond Habel. You are listening to KLLG 97.9 Willits, Hometown Radio, and I'll talk to you again soon. All right, can we zoom out? 43 minutes. Oops. Oh boy. Okay, so I have this thing. I'm going to turn this off. Oh boy.